Good evening, all of you. Where were you the last class? Sriram? We completed with the chapter on circulation, no? We were doing circulation. What were you doing last class? Right?
तो ये वाला अब pulse और blood pressure
अच्छा, only those two definitions. I think almost we are done with it. Some of the last few more topics. Okay, we'll take that. And before that, let us summarize for 5 minutes. Any doubts, any confusion regarding that, regarding the almost the part of the chapter we are done, except for few 4 or 5 definitions only to study. So I've got 2 continuous lectures today. The next topic that you wanted was chemical coordinations, and that's a very, very theoretical chapter, also nothing much to understand. So we'll try to finish with this chapter today. Because in this chapter, you just need to revise and remember the points, but of course, there's a little bit of an understanding, not as conceptual. What happened? Why 3 of you together? Too much in love they are. Get separated, all of you. Shriram, idhar aa jao. No. Idhar aa. Never mind. Notebook hai tumhare paas? There is more than enough. Idhar aa. Tanmay. Your name is not Tanmay. Huh? ये उसका तुम्हारा है टेक्स्ट बुक, इसके पास नहीं है? हाँ तो है ना। कौन सा तुम इतना सीरियसली पढ़ाई करने वाले? और ये क्या? You all come by turn when your brother is coming, you are not coming, and you are coming, your brother is not coming. क्या पेरेंट्स एक को ही आने देता है घर से? ऐसा है? क्या हो गया अभी? What happened to your brother? Huh?
I'm going to watch TV.
Wow, excellent.
nice.
Speechless. इधर आ जाओ करना।
उसके बाद
इधर आ जाओ, straight. Get up and come here now. 5 minutes, let us just revise. All of you will try answering questions. The first question only about circulatory system I'm asking right now. What now?
Separate them also.
I know. Only because I have to respect my gender more than you all. But see that I can. तुम लोग ऐसे बातें करोगे उनके जैसे, then I have to separate you also. Now, Okay, close your books. No looking into the book and answering. Close your books. What is diapedesis? One by one, one by one, one by one. What is diapedesis? What is diapedesis? No raising hands. What is diapedesis? Hey, you could be answering so fast. Through the capillary wall into the site of infection. The squeezing out of WBCs through the capillary wall into the site of infection, a very important definition. Diapedesis, the enzyme which is released by the platelets. Enzyme released by the platelets at the site of injury, at the site of wound healing. What is that enzyme released by the platelets? Enzyme released by the platelets at the site of healing, thrombokinase or thromboplastin. Any of the two you write, thrombokinase or thromboplastin. Chemical released by the chemicals released by lymphocytes. What type of chemicals are released by the special chemicals released by lymphocytes? Special chemicals released by lymphocytes. Antibodies, especially antibodies released by lymphocytes. What is the form or what is the process of defense carried out by neutrophils and phagocytes or neutrophils and monocytes? I will take answer. Phagocytosis. What is called phagocytosis? What is the average number of WBCs? Average number of WBCs. These things you have to remember. Average number of WBC.
14 to 50.
No.
200,000.
WBC, that's it. Average number of.
1,000.
That is how the platelets you are talking about. 4,000 to 9,000, 4,000 to 8,000, 4,000 to 9,000. What is the total number of RBCs in females? RBCs. 4 to 5 million cells per cubic millimeter of blood.
4.5 to 5.5.
4.5 to 5.5. No, itna number nahi chahiye. You are supposed to write 4.5 to 5 for females, 5 to 5.5 for males. What is the site of formation of RBCs in an embryo? Site of formation of RBCs in an embryo. And liver. Okay? Not to underestimate anybody in this planet. Now, liver and spleen. What is the lifespan of WBCs? Lifespan of WBCs? WBCs, I said, that is for RBC. 2 to 3 weeks, 2 weeks generally, 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. Then name the type of or what type of antigen, which antigen and antibody, what type of antigen and antibody are present in a person with blood group A? Please answer this side. Answer karo. Antigen and antibody present in the blood of a person with blood group A. Which antigen and which antibody you are supposed to have? Blood group A, I say. Antigen A, antibody B. A अगर होगा तो एंटीजन A ही होना है, B अगर होगा तो एंटीजन B ही होना है. When we are talking about the red color of the blood, what is the most important factor for the red color of the blood? Why the blood is red in color? What are the two components of hemoglobin? The last one there. What's your name? Soham, Jago. What are the two components of hemoglobin? Yaad karo, this is one of the simplest questions that I can think of right now. Components of hemoglobin kya hai? Why the blood is red in color? The blood is red in color because of that component only. What is the name of that component? Omkar. Arey, hemoglobin में oxygen. I taught you this. You have to spoil my name, fame, everything. Which component of the hemoglobin is responsible for the red color of the blood? Arey, bolo. Which component of hemoglobin is responsible for the red color of the blood? The iron component. Hemoglobin has two components, iron component and the protein component. The protein component to color नहीं देता, iron component का नाम क्या है? Heme or hemin. Heme or hemin. H-E-A-M-E. Heme or hemin. The blood vessel that carries oxygenated blood into the heart. Oxygenated blood into the heart. Pulmonary vein. Pulmonary vein. The blood vessels which carry oxygenated blood towards body tissues. Blood vessel that carries oxygenated blood towards body tissues. Okay, aorta. The blood vessels which carry deoxygenated blood. Blood vessels which carry deoxygenated blood from the stomach and into intestine towards the liver. Stomach and intestine towards the liver. Blood vessel that carry blood from the stomach intestine towards the liver.
Hepatic.
Portal vein.
Hepatic.
Portal vein.
Hepatic.
Portal vein. The gastric and the mesenteric will form the portal, and then when it unites with the liver, then hepatic portal. Coming out from the liver, the blood vessels or the vessel which carries blood from the liver. Vessel that carries blood away from the liver. What is it? Blood vessel that carries blood away from the liver. Away from the liver.
Portal. Hepatic.
Hepatic vein. Now it is the hepatic vein. Portal, hepatic portal, hepatic, then vena cava. अब liver से निकलेगा तो portal word use नहीं होगा ना? Then it is only hepatic. Hepatic. What is the significance of the portal vein? Why the veins from the liver and the stomach and intestine enters? Why does the blood from the stomach and intestine enters the heart via the liver? Why does the blood from the stomach and intestine enters into the heart and then enters into the liver and then into the heart? What was the significance we studied the other day? The blood deposit to deposit the वो तो हर एक vessel कर रहा है.
Base. Glucose.
What was the significance of the blood coming from the stomach and intestine to go through the liver and then meet the chambers of the heart? But I talk about any other tissue, straight from that tissue it runs into the vein and vena cava and heart. The blood from the muscle, are they going via the liver? No. The blood from the kidneys, are they going via the liver? No, straight away meet the vena cava, pour the blood into the heart. But the moment I'm talking about the veins from the stomach, veins from the intestine, they will unite, portal vein, go into the liver, then come out from the liver and meet the vena cava, then come into the heart. Why this? What was the significance we had learned? You were asked the significance of hepatic portal system. To deposit the nutrients into the liver, the glucose, the amino acids, the fatty acids into the liver, and then only blood goes away. Name the vessel in which the blood flows at a very high pressure. Arteries. Name one feature present in the veins structural feature of the vein which allows free movement of blood towards the heart. The presence of the valves. Name the valves present at the base of the aorta. Valves at the base of the aorta. Think. Name. Semilunar, correct. Specific नाम है उसका. Semilunar है, but semilunar 2 types होता है. The one at the base of the aorta, I am asking you. At the base of the aorta, just few more questions. At the base of the aorta, aortic semilunar. How many veins, how many pulmonary veins enter into the left auricle? How many pulmonary veins enter into the left auricle? How many pulmonary veins enter into the left auricle?
One.
Left auricle.
Left auricle.
One.
Four pulmonary veins enter into the left auricle. Which chamber of the heart contracts with the greatest force and why?
The right artery.
Maximum force of contraction in which chamber of the heart? Left ventricle. Why?
Because it pumps the blood.
Every part of the body. Furthest regions of the body. Furthest regions of the body. Which, what is the heart sound produced when the atrioventricular valve closes? Love. The love sound is produced when the atrioventricular valve closes. What is the contraction phase of the heart wall known as? Contraction phase of the heart wall is known as systole. Systole is the contraction phase of the heart. The last question, which is the largest vein of the body? Vena cava. Vena cava. So many questions there in this chapter, reasoning, etc., name, location, function, we are supposed to understand. Now, since we were talking about the contraction, we were talking about the systole and the diastole. So related with that at the start, we talk about the cardiac cycle. So certain things we are left with is we are to talk about cardiac cycle. We are to talk about pulse. We have to talk about heartbeat. Did we discuss heartbeat? We discussed blood pressure. And what else? We have to talk about blood pressure. What else? Okay. Tissue, fluid, and lymph.
The spleen.
Tissue, fluid. Pacemaker. Okay. Correct. The pacemaker, the nodes you have to understand. The pacemaker. I think that is all. What else is there? What else is there? Tell me. Did you complete the exercises of this? Did we do the exercises? Yes. No. The previous exercises here, did we do? Progress checks, did we do? This is not done in your school, no? It will do. Complete some of your exercises.
These are
not very important topics. So just few definitions only to talk about. Because as you solve questions, you come across doubts. Clarify your doubts also at the same time. Take this progress check, page 96. No? 96. Progress check 96, 98. All this you should be able to solve now. 101, 96, 98, 101, 103, 104. Complete karo, fatafat. Let's see if you are able to answer all of this. As you start answering, you will come across doubts. Clarify karo doubts. Chalo. What happened? Done. Huh? Try. Go through. Try. Go to the sample first part of the chapter you are there. No? The only last lecture you were not there. 2 lectures you were not there. Chalo, go through the questions. You have a doubt, ask me. 15 minutes where you should be finishing all these questions so that we are able to finish the chapter this period, and the next period, chemical coordination, we try to discuss. More and more questions, some will be able to do it in the class, all may not be able to do in the class. So you have to solve all questions. Unless and until you solve questions, concept will never be clear. Hmm. Sriram, by the time you read the chapter, no? You have a doubt, you can ask me. I'm giving them 10 minutes to solve the questions after you read the chapter. Don't just sit like that. You have a doubt, keep asking.
Structure that holds the heart valve in position.
Huh?
The structure that holds the heart valves in position.
That I'll show you. That is known as a caudate tendinite. These are fibrous tissues. See here, I'll show you in this figure. Caudate tendinae, when we are talking about the caudate tendinae, you can look at the caudate tendinae in your figure there. Caudate tendinae are this. Caudate tendinae are fine thread-like tissue. These are muscular, fine muscular tissues, which are connecting the ends of the tip of the valve to the inner ventricular wall. Ventricular wall and the tip of the valves, they connect. Something like this, if I show you in a typical diagram, this is a detailed diagram. If I talk about a diagram like this, when I draw the structure of the heart, and say, suppose now I'm drawing the valves here. So from here to here, we draw this type of structure this way. Inner wall of the ventricle to the tip of the valve, caudate tendinae, caudate tendinae.
Where is it?
Which one?
Where is it?
Caudate tendinae.
8.7.
Must be there.
8.7.
CS.
Caudate tendinae. Let us solve the questions. Some of you
1 minute.
Make the following. Keep writing all of it. We'll do it together. Go faster. Start answering from there. Name the following. 96. I started 96. Name the following. The yellow colored fluid part of the blood. Yellow colored fluid part of the blood. Plasma. Yellow colored fluid part of the blood. Plasma. Next. The respiratory pigment. Hemoglobin in the RBC. Hemoglobin. Any two organelles absent in mature RBC. No mitochondria, nucleus, endoplasmic reticulum, anything you can write there. Golgi is also not there for RBC. The process of WBC is finishing out. Diabetes. And mention the following: average lifespan of RBC 120. The range of RBC atoms 2.48. 4.5 to 5. The two major categories of WBC. A granulocyte, या तो granular leukocyte, a granular leukocyte, anything you write. Blood cells involved in leukemia, WBC. Before, next, because if you write the answers, keep reading. The next set of questions. Next set of questions.
Statement of the following statements and two process of coagulation starting with the release of a substance from RBC spots.
Karo.
Blood fails to clot readily in the case of deficiency.
RBC doesn't release anything at the time. Bolo, I did not hear. Sorry.
Blood fails to clot readily in the case of deficiency of calcium spots.
No, blood fails to clot. Blood fails to clot due to the deficiency of calcium. True. Calcium is necessary for the conversion of prothrombin to thrombin. Next, Ongar. The solid fibrin and thrombus is same. Thrombin is a protein. Thrombin is not the same. But if it is thrombus, same. Next. What is the question?
The category of name the following category of vitamin required for carbon dioxide.
Okay.
Any of these diseases related with blood clotting, no severe and primary DMC works. The antibodies present in the plasma, O-type blood group, O-ALT. The antigen for which RX stands in the contents of blood group form.
This is not. RX stands for next. Next set of questions, keep reading. No, you can discuss together.
Ventricles not that involved in compared with renal organs.
Hiccup wall. Ventricles have hiccup wall. Next.
Ventricles give rise to large blood vessels or attachments.
What's over? Ventricles give rise to large blood vessels. Aorta, pulmonary artery, aorta. And aorta. Next.
Where are the following located? Tricuspid valve.
Between right auricle and right ventricle. Right auricle, right ventricle. Last one there. So bolo. You don't have to go.
इसके लिए बैठा
So that बुलानो सामने.
नहीं मैं
Complete करो. You answer every 5 questions when you go down. बोलो. Oh. Opportunity मिला नहीं she was grabbing the delegate. Why don't want to sit in the front? बोलो complete करो भी.
Where are the following located? Now second is
Ventricular valve. Between
left right and left right. It is written here left side of the heart.
You have to write chambers. Left auricle, left ventricle.
Pulmonary semilunar valves.
Right ventricle lungs.
Between pulmonary semilunar valve. Pulmonary semilunar is between the right ventricle and pulmonary artery. Right ventricle and pulmonary artery. Right ventricle pulmonary artery. पीछे मतलब एकदम लास्ट उसके साथ में बैठना है जाओ ये पूरा नाम तो टॉप 3 नेक्स्ट next set of questions all done are we done with all continue
Name the word contraction phase of the heart.
next
The structure that holds the heart as a position
caudate tendon huh? Look into that. This type of structures are there. So you have to name the structure as caudate tendinae. These are known as caudate tendinae. Caudate tendinae. These are T-E-N-D-I-N-A-E. 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 Caudate tendinae. Next.
Mention the phase of heartbeat in which both the atrioventricular valves are closed.
Both interventricular
Atrioventricular
close, love. Type of the sound, love. And if you are asked question,
open and down.
no, if it is semilunar valves closed, that also can be a question. A hard sound when the semilunar valves close, duct. When they open, they don't make any characteristic sound. When they close, then only they make the sound. Actually, next set of questions.
Love that. The waves are within and left circular wall and
That's a true false.
No,
You get a question.
know the answer. The answer. Fill in the blank.
Valves left right there.
There are multiple.
Now it's a different type of question. Which is the brand that you answered?
There are multiple. That's fill in circular dash and have that to prevent factor of that.
Okay, there are so many of your research. Big and less muscular dash and have that so big have big and less muscular wall and have valves to prevent backflow of blood. Walls. Muscular walls, WK-LFS. And next step valves. Backflow of blood. What on next?
To an organ break up into dash ending in capillaries.
Dash carry blood to an organ. Artery carry blood to an organ. And break up into arterioles ending in capillaries. Breaking into arterioles to end in capillaries. Next. Walls of capillaries consist of a single layer of squamous, epithelium. Next, squamous epithelial, or epithelium. Squamous epithelium. Now, the same thing. No, but squamous के साथ squamous endothelium नहीं लिखोगे. Only endothelium, but they are mentioning squamous. So you have to write the type of an epithelium now. That's a specific type of epithelium. Squamous epithelium, a layer of squamous epithelial cells or epithelium, and the substance to and from the tissue diffused to the walls of capillaries. To the walls of capillaries. Are we done?
We are done. We are done. Go back.
One more is there.
What is that?
Can I page number 100?
One more is there, which one?
What is that?
Follow, follow. Systemic and pulmonary. major systems of circulation which forms the double circulation pattern in our body, systemic and pulmonary. So what is systemic circulation? Can I ask you now? What is systemic circulation? Circulation of the blood from the heart to the lungs and back to the heart. कौन बता पाएगा मुझे कहाँ से कहाँ तक जाता है? From which part of the heart to the lungs? कौन सा? Systemic circulation. I am talking about systemic circulation. Systemic circulation कहाँ से कहाँ जाएगा?
Left ventricles to the body tissue.
Left ventricle.
Ventricle to the body tissue.
Left ventricle systemic. I am talking about. Systemic left ventricle to
the body tissue.
And
then back to right auricle.
Left ventricle to body tissues and then to right auricle. Okay, straight I am talking about the body tissues and the heart. And if I talk about pulmonary circulation,
right ventricle to the lungs and then to left auricle.
And then to left auricle. So this is what you are talking. In between, you have to mention vessels and valves when you are asked as a proper question. Now, next is, let us try to complete with this part of the chapter, that is, और बाकी है? अच्छा बोलो.
Renal artery.
Renal artery from, what is the question they are asking?
From where to where do they carry the blood?
From where to where? From the heart to the kidneys. From the heart. Pulmonary artery. What is the question? Tell me. Pulmonary artery.
Where do the following blood vessels carry blood? Pere pulmonary artery.
For pulmonary artery, if you have to talk right ventricle to lungs. Right ventricle to lungs. Done? All done? What is it? Carry from where to where? Posterior vena cava will carry from lower body tissues to right auricle. Lower body tissues to right auricle. Lower body tissues to right auricle. Hepatic vein. Hepatic vein. From where to where it carries? Hepatic vein from liver and right auricle. Liver to right auricle. Liver to right auricle. If I talk about, say suppose I am talking about the stomach. I am talking about the stomach. And then I am talking about the intestine. Okay, now this is the intestinal portion that I understand. Now the veins which are coming from here and the veins which are coming from here, if I talk about, then what is this vein? This vein is the portal vein. This vein is the portal vein. And then when I talk about the heart vein here somewhere, say suppose I am talking about the heart is here. I am talking about the heart is here, the four-chambered heart is here. So now this is the portal vein. And then I talk about the liver. So this portal vein enters and starts merging up with the capillaries of the liver. There, what happened to Ashwarya? She is sleeping there. Now here we are talking about the hepatic portal vein. This hepatic portal vein, they will have many tributaries and now they come up. So this is the hepatic vein that I am talking about. This is the hepatic vein. Hepatic vein. Now this merges with the vena cava and this will merge with the vena cava and then enter into the right auricle. So from the stomach and intestine, the veins will first unite to form the portal vein, then the hepatic portal vein, then the hepatic vein, and then the vena cava to enter into the right auricle. So this would be the pattern. For other body tissues, they don't go through the liver. Now, next is define what? Define portal vein.
मैम नहीं तो मैम hepatic portal vein का तो फिर vein to ये होगा ना, sorry liver to
What is that? Hepatic portal vein. Hepatic portal vein you want to write from stomach, intestine to liver. ये organs लिखो. सबसे ज्यादा ये है कि part of the body लिखना है. From where to where the blood goes. Part of the body लिखना है. Define portal vein.
how can hepatic vein
Portal vein का definition. Now in this diagram of I was showing you, this is portal vein is one vessel which starts as capillaries. Say suppose I draw, this is the portal vein. This is starting as capillaries, no? And some of these capillaries coming from the stomach and some of this coming from the intestine. Some of this coming from the intestine. There. At this age, the force of you all are influenced by the force of gravity so much. सब कुछ नीचे गिर जाता है, पता नहीं क्यों? हाँ? Water bottle गिरा है.
क्या टाइमिंग है?
Why you all are so clumsy? No, this age is so clumsy. It's not about you and you, the entire age group. Now, fatapat, this definition is very important. Which definition you are talking about? Portal vein. Now, this portal vein is a specific vein which starts as capillaries. It's a vein which starts as capillaries, just now I showed you. And now that you talk about the liver, now that I talk about the liver, here also it breaks up into capillaries. Here also it is breaking up into capillaries. So a portal vein is a vessel which starts as capillaries and breaks up into capillaries. Starts as capillaries and ends into capillaries. So that is the definition that you should always write. Portal vein is one such vein which starts as capillaries and ends as capillaries. Both ways.
You have to say the location, like it's connected.
Location you understand from stomach, intestine to liver. Starts as capillaries and ends as capillaries or ends with capillaries. So that is what you understand. Now, whatever, let us try coming across some few more terms. We are talking about the cardiac cycle. Done? No, all of you done?
Yes.
Cardiac cycle. Now, what do you understand by the word cardiac cycle? If before cardiac cycle, I have to talk about heartbeat. What do you understand by heartbeat? The moment I talk about heartbeat means how many number of times the left ventricle is contracting. To be very specific, how many number of times the left ventricle contracts? Because every time the left ventricle contracts, the blood is thrown into the tissues. Every time the left ventricle is contracting, the blood is coming out of the tissues. So how many number of times the left ventricle contracts in a minute? Roughly around 72 times. 72, 75, that is normal now. So when we are talking about the number of times the left ventricle contracts and pumps out blood, that is what we understand as heartbeat. But now, when we are talking about the left ventricular contraction, it is not only that chamber can contract, but it is sequential event. Now, when we look into a little bit in a broader aspect, we are understanding something like this, that first is when we understand that what should happen, first is now to talk in a sequence, what is happening, the auricles first get filled with blood. Then if these are now filled with blood, this will be followed by auricular contraction. So this is a major step when we have to talk about the events of the heartbeat. So I would write auricular systole, contraction phase. We are talking about auricular systole. This is one specific phase now. So auricular systole has happened. Now next word, the blood is going into the ventricles. I would say the ventricular wall is dilating. What is the other word? Ventricular wall is dilating. What is the other word? You think I'm teaching English right now? Ventricular diastole. Ventricular diastole. So when we are talking about relaxing को क्या बोलेंगे? What is the meaning? What is the word? Technical word for relaxation of the heart wall? Diastole. And just now I said systole here. So now this is one prominent event. Why? Because if the auricles are not contracting at a regular force, adequate amount of blood does not enter the ventricle and the rest of the process also gets slowed down. So now we are talking about ventricular diastole. Then when the ventricles are getting filled with blood, this is again another prominent phase. Ventricular systole. This is again another specific phase. So what is that second phase that we are talking about? The second phase that we are talking about is ventricular systole, and this will be followed by a short period again where the auricles also and the ventricles also are relaxing. A particular period when the auricles also relax a little bit and the ventricles are also in a relaxed state before the process of auricular systole again starts. So what I'm saying, in this entire concept, in this entire process of heartbeat, which involves stage by stage relaxation and the expansion of the heart walls, the prominent phases are auricular systole is one, ventricular systole is another, and this is called relax of the joint diastole. This is called the joint diastole. What is the meaning of joint diastole? Joint diastole, you want to understand where both the auricles or जब ventricular diastole हो रहा है, the auricles are already ventricular systole हो रहा है, the auricles are already in a diastolic phase. Auricles are already in a diastolic phase, but before the auricles again start contracting, the ventricles also enter into the diastolic phase. So there is a particular period of time when the auricles also and the ventricles also are in a diastolic phase, and this is what is known as joint diastolic phase. Roughly, when we talk about the time period, it is much lesser than a second. It is much lesser than a second, where we would understand that this phase is roughly around 0.15 seconds, 0.30 seconds, 0.40 seconds, roughly like this, where the entire process, all these steps, entire process takes place in about 0.83 to 85. The entire process takes place in 0.83 to 0.85 seconds, and this sequence of events, that is what is called cardiac cycle. Now, how are you going to define that word cardiac cycle? What is cardiac cycle? The sequence of events of a heartbeat. The sequence of events of a heartbeat. And what are the prominent events to remember? Auricular systole, ventricular systole, and joint diastole. Joint diastole से ये याद रखना है. When I am talking about joint diastole, both I am talking about auricular diastole as well as auricular relaxation as well as ventricular relaxation, both happening together. Auricular relaxation as well as ventricular relaxation. If that is cardiac cycle, then what is pulse? Pulse means that every time, now again we refer to the concept of left ventricle. The left ventricle is contracting at the greatest force. The left ventricle always contracts and the blood gets pushed into the aorta, arteries, arterioles. So now the capillaries. Now that I'm talking about that the left ventricle has contracted, now that I talk about that the left ventricle has contracted and the blood has pushed into the aorta and then into the arteries. Now that we are talking about the arteries and the arterioles, in certain few regions of the body, the arterioles at least we can sense and feel. Say suppose I talk about this few regions of the body, or you talk about these regions of the body, when at least you just tap with your fingertips, you can feel those ticks every second. You can feel those ticks. So what is happening? What does those ticks actually refer to? Ventricular contraction. Left ventricle contracting. How many number of times the left ventricle is contracting? So that is actually not, we don't say this is the heartbeat, but we say this is the pulse. So actually what is happening every time when the left ventricle is contracting, how do we relate with this? I would say that if this is the heart, and now I'm talking about the left ventricle contracting. If the left ventricle contracts, and what is the situation we come across in an artery or arteriole is, as the blood is flowing, the blood is hitting the walls. The blood is flowing at a great pressure. I'm talking about a relation between the left ventricle, which has just undergone the process of contraction. The blood is thrown into all the arteries of the body, the arterioles. So, ये arteriole में क्या हो रहा है? What is happening in these arteries or arteriole wall? The blood is hitting, the blood is hitting, the blood is hitting, because the blood is running at a great force now. So as the blood is hitting the wall expands a little bit and again comes back. As the blood is moving, the wall is expanding a little bit and again coming back. Expanding a little bit and again coming back. And that is what you are feeling here. That is what you are feeling here. The ticks that you feel. That is what you're feeling here. So what do we understand is, and how to write it in this specific form, what to write? The expansion and the elastic coming back. The expansion and the elastic recoil of the wall of the arteries, which is associated with left ventricular contraction every time. So now, what is the definition of the word pulse? The expansion and the elastic recoil of the wall of the arteries during ventricular contraction. During ventricular. Now that I talk about ventricular contraction, are we actually understanding right ventricular contraction? No, we are actually talking about left ventricular contraction. Why not right ventricular contraction? Because by the way of right ventricular contraction, the blood only moves into the lungs, only into the respiratory surface. So that is about the pulse. Blood pressure. What is the meaning of blood pressure? Quite often, you have always come across something like this to be written. No, the doctors always write something like this, and that they check the blood pressure either with those cuffs or those manual pumps or digital. Those manometers are there. So what is been done there? Those cuffs, what are they trying? They have been puffed up, and then now that they have been puffed up, it has been tightened here. Why like that? So that they can measure very finely the flow, the rate and in which the blood is flowing in the inner vessels, into the blood vessels inside. And what are they trying to record? What are these numbers that we are talking about? 120 by 80, for example. I talk about 120 by 80. This is for the upper limit, the lower limit. What does the upper limit refer to? Upper limit refers to the force with which the heart chambers are contracting, systole. So this upper chamber or this upper limit refers to the systolic condition, the systolic phase. And what about the lower limit? This refers to the diastolic phase. This refers to the diastole. But again, systole of which chamber? Left ventricle. Systole of the left ventricle and diastole of the overall heart or the left ventricle again. So now, hypertension or high blood pressure, what is the meaning of that? If this upper limit is something around 140 or more, and if this lower limit is something around 90 or more, there is something to be worried about. But still today, when we are talking about clinically, they would generally say that 140 is quite normal, and something around 150-55 is something to be worried about, and something around 85 to 90 is quite normal also at times, they would say. But what do we understand of the concept of hypertension? Just a few concepts to understand. Say suppose when we are walking, running, jumping, playing, etc., some strenuous muscular activity, and within a period of some 5-10 minutes, we get to test our blood pressure. Are we going to get 120 by 80? No, no. 120 by 80, most of us, we may not get it. Maybe something around 130 to around say, 130 by 82, 85, 84. That is high blood pressure. No, that is not high blood pressure. When a person is on rest, no physical activity for the last half an hour, or day by day when the pressure has been monitored, and every time the pressure is found to be something around higher than 160. 160 by 85, 160 by 90, or 165. If that is what we are talking about, something above than 150, 55, and here we talk about something more than 90, and this is persistent living birth. That's a case of high blood pressure. What is something to be worried about when there is persistent high blood pressure in an individual? That's the reason. What may be the effect in the body? There may be something like when we are talking about the rupturing of the blood vessel. That is most common if a person is not on medication and if this has been there for a long period of time. Rupturing of the blood vessel, meaning release of blood inside the body. Blood vessels are torn, release of blood inside the body, which is a pacemaker condition at times. Pacemaker, I just finished with this, and tissue fluid, nothing much to understand. We just finish with this and then I'll give you away. Now, pacemaker, if I talk about what is pacemaker, when I look into the structure of the heart, here, I talk about this particular region. I talk about this particular region. Which one? I'm talking about the right auricle. Now, this right auricle, when I look into the structure of the heart, the right auricle is supposed to have a specialized set of muscles. And this is what is known as SAN, sino-auricular node. This is known as sino-auricular node. What is the meaning of node here? Just a set of muscles. From here, the process of contraction starts, initiates every time. So from here, the process of contraction will initiate and will spread out all over the heart. Just like when I drop some stones in a standing pond or a lake, how exactly the ripples develop exactly that way. So from a particular point, the force of contraction starts. But what will initiate the force of contraction? The amount of blood that gets filled up in the right auricle. The amount of blood, when a considerable amount of blood is filled up in the right auricle, now this force of contraction starts, and it will start from this particular region. But what is this? It's a specialized set of cardiac muscles itself. And from here, the force of contraction starts, spreads up the entire auricle, then spreads up the entire ventricular region also. So related to this, there are another set of muscles exactly at the junction of the auricle, ventricle, and the two ventricles. And this is what is known as the AVN. What is AVN? Atrioventricular node. And this atrioventricular node is another junction as if which is taking this force of contraction and allowing to spread it further in the entire muscular wall of the heart. So, but then this is not known as the pacemaker. This is known as the pacemaker. You must also come across people who get their pacemakers changed. Did you come across anything like that? When people suffer from major heart issues, there's a particular type of a treatment where the artificial pacemakers, they get installed in their body, they get set in their body, which is again nothing but a specific type of an artificial tissue which can perform this function of allowing the contraction happen. So this is what we are trying to understand as pacemakers. This is a simple concept. We'll just try to finish up in the next class and then start with the next chapter. Nobody will catch this.
So anything in class date?
हो गया और 70 सितंबर था
वो देसी बंद कर दे
अरे तो खत्म हो गया
आज था
वो कह रहा
कितना किसको मेरे को बोलता था वही किया क्या उसने जितेंद्र के नाम से क्या बोला उसके बाप का भाई जितेंद्र धूप में है कहीं तो दूसरे को बोले चला कि 10 बार सोचेगा क्लास में तो कुछ ना कुछ बोलते हैं फिर मार जाने मैं क्लास में कुछ नहीं बोल रहा देखा है
तू सस्ता है मतलब उससे
अबे सब लोग
मैं दे भाई लाके अबे दे भाई अजीब सा लग रहा है सारे दूसरे में आएगा
इसलिए तो बैल का
मेरा मैसेज नहीं आ रहा
भाई हलचल हो रही थी
भाई अरे यार ऐसे स्ट्रेट होना चाहिए
भाई आगे तक कोई मारता ये तो मैं एक्टिंग वीडियो
अरे आज सब
अबे टेनिस में
तू डेट दिया है कभी है ये
अरे आज का हमारे मीटिंग में खाना बोल दिए थे
अबे एंड दिया सितंबर दिया है
तेरा बहाना ही हुआ
अबे क्या बता रजिस्ट्रेशन है कभी वो
मैंने भी रजिस्ट्रेशन कर
अबे
हाँ आज ही है मैम ने बोला घर पे बैठो हमें 5 मिनट एक्स्ट्रा मिल हमने 5 मिनट और
Oh my God. With whom are you talking?
Nani mom
Ask your nanny not to miss you so much in a 1 hour time you're reaching home. You? So funny, and what is so interesting over there that you want to go? You're missing your friends so much. Whom are you missing so much with them? तन्मय इधर आ जाओ कौन सा ये वाला तन्मय no problem. Put off the AC. No, go and ask him. Put off the AC. I don't have any problem. Come. You can put it on the AC now. Come. And by my bad, where do you come across? Acha, there, and geography and all.
yes yes
If you are really ready to study very much. You are very sure if you biology if you try really interested in the medical stream, पढ़ना पड़ेगा बहुत. WhatsApp or Insta करके इतना difficult होएगा. If you have the tenacity to sit and study for hours, then of course. And yeah, I don't know, I'm not commenting on any profession, but study biology and go into the medical field, I feel that's always a very, very prestigious profession to go for. No, don't ask me why. That is what I feel. My opinion. My opinion. But yes, all other professions are appreciable enough, but that is my thing. And during my time, I couldn't do that, so I came into this field of biology, is something that I loved. So,
Ma'am, what time you?
huh? Me, and so kabhi aap nahi aayi. Percentage is very high at that time. 97, 98.
मैम आपने नहीं दिया था मुझे दिया है मैम बताओ मैम 600
It was low, that's why I couldn't make it.
आपसे मेरा
Time पैसा है
किसको किसको इतना पैसा लेकर कर सकता है ऐसा नहीं
My parents they were absolutely against donation. तुम merit से करते हो तो करो. दे दे started.
No,
I'm here to switch on the fan. Chalo. Now, last one topic to talk about, tissue fluid. What is the relation of tissue fluid with blood? You have to only understand a specific figure here. You are, what is that? Pulling each other, what is this? Huh? Exposed each other. You don't have the strength to even put a curtain. What are you will not be able to put a curtain on Now we talk about tissue fluid. What is tissue fluid that you are supposed to understand? Say suppose this
अरे पोस्ट कम कर गया बारिश क्या करना
now see here, now no more talking. Not really nice. Try to understand this relation. What is this? We are first of all trying to talk about the chambers of the heart, and I say that this is the right ventricle. Then which is this chamber? Now, which is this vessel? Aorta. This aorta divides into a large number of arteries. And if these are arteries, then what are these vessels that I am talking about? These are the capillaries. Now, when the blood is flowing in the capillaries, when the blood flows in these capillaries, what is happening? Some properties of the capillaries already you know. The capillaries have got what? Pores. The capillaries have got fine pores. The capillary wall is very thin. The capillary pores are very thin. The capillaries have got pores. So because of that, certain amount of substances, as I said, that the capillary walls are very thin and they have got pores, certain amount of substances will start seeping out. Certain amount of substances will start moving out. And what would be those substances? What would be that liquid consisting of? And now that the liquid starts coming out, what would be the composition of this liquid? This liquid composition would be majorly plasma and a variety of salts, ions, and cells, if at all, only the WBC. Cells like the RBC and the platelets would never come out. So this is the first thing to understand. So when the blood is flowing in the capillaries, and the capillaries are always very close to the body tissues. So now quite a large number of substances start moving out through the capillary pores, and this liquid which is now getting formed and passing over the tissues, it is flowing over the tissues. It is flowing over the tissues and certain amount of diffusion is happening. So what is the composition of this fluid? Majorly plasma. WBC sometimes may be there. So this fluid is what we are talking about as the tissue fluid. So what is this fluid that we talk about? This fluid is a tissue fluid, and the composition of the tissue fluid is majorly the composition of the plasma. But this tissue fluid, does it remain on the tissues for a long time? No, it does not remain because there is another system of tubes which help in the drainage now. So just on one side of the tissues, we have got the blood capillaries. And just parallel to them, we have got the lymph capillaries, the lymphatic vessels. So which vessels I have drawn here? These are the lymph vessels or the lymphatic vessels. So these lymphatic vessels, what are they going to do? They generally help in the process of drainage. I repeat again, I say that this tissue fluid which is now running over the tissues, if they remain here for a longer period of time, what will be the condition of our body? The body part will start swelling up. The body part would start swelling up. So we have got another secondary tube in our system parallel to the blood capillaries every time. So now that this tissue fluid is there, they start diffusing in. And this results in the formation of another set of fluid which has already diffused into these tubes. Which tubes I'm talking about now? The lymphatic vessels. So this tissue fluid is actually undergone the process of diffusion. So the composition of this and the composition of this fluid, which I name as lymph, are almost similar except for certain amount of ions, proteins, and salts. That's a minor difference again to talk about. So now this tissue fluid, why this fluid is known as a tissue fluid? Because it is just flowing over the tissues. But this fluid on the tissues, they don't remain for a long time, but they again start diffusing into another set of tubes, the lymphatic tubes. And these lymphatic vessels, which now carry the lymph, what are some of the characteristics of the lymph here? The lymph is colorless. The lymph is colorless. What is the composition of the lymph? Majorly plasma. Composition of the lymph would be majorly plasma. If at all we come across blood cells, only WBCs. And what are the other characteristics of the lymph? Functions of the lymph you are supposed to understand. The lymph is always formed from the blood. Yes or no? It is always formed from blood. It is not, of course, it is considered as a secondary fluid in our body, but it is not absolutely different from the blood. It is formed from the blood and always goes and meets the blood. It is formed from the blood and always meets the blood. So how does it meet the blood? Because now that I'm talking about that this lymph will always go and join a vein. The lymphatic tubes, the lymphatic vessels will always go and join a vein. So if it goes and joins a vein, what is there in the vein? In the vein, the blood is there. And this lymph is going and joining with the vein there, and this gets mixed with the blood, and that is how again they pour into the right auricle. Understood? So now that I say that the lymph and the blood, are they completely separate fluid that we have in our body? No, the lymph is formed from the blood and they go and meet the blood again. Functions of the lymph. Now, if you have to talk about what are some of the functions of the lymph, at least 2 to 3 functions you are supposed to understand. I talk about the functions. The first function of the lymph that just now we were talking about is drainage. The first function of the lymph is the drainage of the excessive tissue fluid. The first function of the lymph, excessive or the drainage of the excessive tissue fluid. What else? If I have to talk about the lymphatic vessels, which is in the intestinal villi. You remember the structure of the intestinal villi? And if you remember the word lacteals, lacteals yaad hai? Lacteals yaad hai? Lacteals are the lymphatic vessels जो एक villus के अंदर रहता है. If you remember, the villus has got large number of blood capillaries and we draw one single vessel there जिसको हम हमेशा lacteal बोलते हैं. So these lacteals are nothing but the lymphatic vessels जो villus के अंदर होता है, and these lacteals always help in absorption of fats. तो हमारे बॉडी में जब फैट का डाइजेशन होता है, the fatty acids first of all enter into the lymph and then they go into the blood. But if I talk about the glucose and the amino acids, they can directly enter into the bloodstream. So that part already had studied. So I would answer, I would also write this, that another function of the lymph is the absorption of the fat. What does a lymph do? Now that I'm talking about the lymph is now running in between the tissues. So is there anything else that the lymph does here? Yes, the lymph also brings about the diffusion of oxygen. So I would say distribution of oxygen is also its function. Distribution of the nutrients and the oxygen. Distribution of the nutrients and the oxygen, that also is the function of the lymph. Separately to understand that if I talk about the blood flow, how does the blood flow? The blood is constantly flowing in the blood vessels. From where does the blood or from where does the pressure get generated for the flow of the blood? By the pumping of the heart. But now that if I have to talk about the lymph does not have anything known as a pumping organ as such, but then how should the lymph constantly keep on flowing or moving? Does it get stagnant at any particular region of the body? No, the lymph is also constantly moving. Then how is the lymph moving? The lymph is constantly moving because of the continuous flow of the lymph in the vessels, and that is brought about because of the muscular contraction all over the body. The more the muscular contraction, better is the lymph flow. More the muscular movement, better is the lymph flow. So is it necessary that the lymph should be continuously in a moving or a fluid state? Yes, they should be constantly moving. Then only they are constantly meeting with the blood, and then the cycle continues. So that's the reason always we come across. We always say that whenever we do a lot of physical activity, exercise, etc., physical activity, strain and muscular activity, that improves the circulation of our body. So here also we are talking about the more the physical activity and muscle contraction, better is the lymph flow. So the lymph constantly flows because of the contraction of the muscles of the body. Better the contraction, better the lymph flow. Okay. So about the lymph flow, this much you have to remember. You are always asked about the composition part, differences between blood and lymph. You are asked about the functions and certain question based on this diagram. A typical diagram, like this you have in your book also. This diagram you have always at the start of the chapter you see. You have this diagram, so based on that also sometimes you are asked question. So at the start of the chapter, this diagram is there. So try to understand the diagram, exactly the same thing that I explained you right now. If anything is there doubtful, I give you 5 minutes to wind up. If anything is doubtful, pucho. हाँ बोलो. अच्छा, spleen. Spleen, nothing much to study there. What is the location of the spleen? At the base of the stomach. At the base of the stomach, it's a small red color organ or globular organ, small structure. As the circulation of the blood happens.
And somebody shared 3 compasses for a discapacited. You still have 1 will be given back to you. So, thank you.
So now that we are talking about spleen, I say by the way of circulation. So now that we are talking about blood
Body
donation. You should donate blood. What happened there? Political topic change that you all are so interested. At least interested in this. जो लोग हैं देश को progress करके I can do my little bit by teaching you also I'm doing that bit. Now, next is we will talk about spleen. Now, what I said, spleen क्या लिखना है? Function. Only that much you will be asked. What is spleen? The position, the function. I think when the circulation of the blood happens, a specific amount of blood is always entering into the spleen, like any other organ. If I talk about the heart and the spleen and the liver, but this small amount of blood which enters into the spleen, the blood, a specific amount of blood always remains in the spleen, and that is always considered as a reservoir of the blood. Sometimes there is a blood loss, though it does not generally help much, but still the body has been made in such a way that if at all there is a little bit of blood loss, the small amount of blood can be released from the spleen and the body can make up. Of course, if there is a major accident, surgery, etc., and the major blood loss that spleen cannot handle. But yes, so that is one function. The spleen acts as a reservoir. Number two, as in when we talk about the circulation of the blood, and the dead RBCs are also very much deposited into the spleen, where the entire process of breakup of those RBCs can happen. Majorly also it happens in the liver, and it can also happen in the spleen. So in that context, the spleen is also known as the graveyard of RBCs. So only this basic concepts about the spleen, nothing in detail about the spleen that you have to study as such. Apart from that, anything that we missed out, check. Anything that we missed out, anything that you want to clarify? Phobia chapter.
What is the function of
Lymph
lymph nodes?
nodes. Okay, now lymph nodes, if I talk about, if this is the lymph vessel, the lymph vessel will always have small nodular structures like whatever. She's so fragile, उसका हाथ निकल के आ रहा है. Now, when we are talking about this small swollen structures, there are some swollen bead-like structures all over the lymphatic vessel, if I show this way, and these are what are known as the lymph nodes, and these lymph nodes are also the site of production of the blood cells. So when we are talking about the lymph nodes, whether the lymph nodes are a particular type of a lymphoid organ, उसके और भी बहुत functions है, but one is it helps in the temporary storage of the lymph. Second, it helps in the production of the WBCs especially. It helps in the production because the blood cells are such type of cells which are produced in certain regions of the body. They cannot divide. So lymph nodes are also the sites which can help in immunity. Lymph nodes are the sites which can produce variety of chemicals, especially one or two functions that you should remember. These are sites for formation of WBC cells. WBC specifically, not RBCs, WBCs. Okay, so these questions, now just go through these questions which I will give you as homework. Now we cannot afford to solve questions. You should be able to do it at home. Tuition hai, then you will tell me the next class. Look into page 110. Number 3 karna hai, number 4 karna hai, number 3, number 4. Short answer type number 3, number 4 you should do. And diagram based questions, let us take some of this, okay? At least one or two only I'll ask you. Number 2 karo, And number 3. Number 2 and 3, come on, complete this.
And now.
And now diagram based questions only. Number 2 and 3 only you will do, the rest take it as homework. Go through the questions. Diagram based questions 2 and 3 abhi karo, whatever. Different book. Questions are more or less similar. देखिए ना question that I gave them something like this. That is one question. And the other one is the harmony way. Chalo, fast. 5 minutes only I give you for this. Complete for us. Can 2 and 3. Page number 111. Doubt it. 111, 2 and 3. Three is hard, 2 is lamb, and no, it's not. It's nearby. It's nearby. That's right. It's nearby. That's all right. Questions you will be able to answer only when you know the parts properly. Let us check the diagram. Check the diagram and keep telling me what does those numbers indicate. Okay, let us start with. I start with number 3. I start with number 3. Number 3 is hers. The number 1 is
Pulmonary
artery. 1 is pulmonary artery.
2 is lungs.
2 is lungs. 4 is pulmonary vein. 4 is pulmonary vein. Then
Aorta.
now 5 is aorta. Then 6 is
No. Hepatic.
5 our aorta है तो 6 is going towards what?
Hepatic.
It's going towards the heart. Hepatic artery.
I'm from when it goes to the stomach to the liver port.
Stomach to the liver portal, then it just in front of the liver it takes up to capillaries and then starts hepatic vein away from the liver the portal. Then number 6 is hepatic hepatic artery. And come to number 7, intestine and 10 is what? Stomach. Then 7 is what? 7 is portal vein. 7 hepatic portal है ना? Hepatic portal दोनों साथ है. If it is not here, then you should write hepatic portal. If it is 7, you should write portal. No.
But I am not 7.
Hepatic portal okay, so portal they have not said. Okay, I need to write hepatic portal. Yes, now next come to kidneys there. Kidneys away from kidneys, 8 should be what? Renal vein. And then it is 9, 8 is okay. And 9 should be what? Third and
Superior.
from the head it is superior. 9 is superior vena cava.
10 is stomach.
And 10 is stomach already is there. That's all.
Give reason to support your answer.
Which part represent the heart? 3. Give reason to support your answer. Give reason to support your answer.
That posterior vena cava, vena cava, then only arteries coming out.
No, I mean, third question, C1, it is value.
Third question P.
Number figure.
Number C. Mention two structural difference. Okay, number C. Capillary. The vessel को दिखा रहा है. That vessel it is. You have to write down which type of vessel it is. C is capillary. 2 is. We have to write. Name the parts 1 to 4. No, that is here. What will be 2 lumen? Lumen. 2 is lumen. Which one is it?
First one is two.
Here you have to write this one is
First, the external, secondly, vertex, and third, middle layer, and
blood vessels.
And are getting this
Entry into that is entry from the head of the liver and getting distributed again out of the liver. So that is the reason that you can write further like that. That naturally. उनका डन उसपे बोलो he's not carrying the book with you. Fast. The rest of the questions go through, try to solve it. But your this one is there, no? Exam में है ना? When is your exam? So 8th October के लिए portion क्या है? Are we done with all the portion? So this is not over, no? Wait. There will be
solution of so we have
so far the exam portion are concerned. No. Regarding your portion, chemical coordination only.
Yes, ma'am.
Rest other than that, all we have to do it.
Next.
Can you go? I have to go. Yes, I still have to see the teachers so liberal nowadays. They do not slap the people other people. Is it so?
What?
Yes.
Horrible. Right.
And we have 5 more minutes. You can solve the rest of the matter. I want to start this chapter.
You explain colors.
Short questions, try करना है, doubts पूछना है करो. I will give you another 5 minutes, but no noise in the class. After 5 minutes, I'm going to start this chapter. You may take your time to solve one more question if you want. You said you want to solve a question, but पूरा time में नहीं दे सकते. We are already done. Please. और कुछ अगर the one thing I asked you to do as homework, if you want to try some of that, we go through. I'll give you last 5 minutes to solve this.
After chemical coordination, can we do chromosome one second?
Next class.
Tomorrow we have
अरे हाँ तो कल संडे
खाने के लिए chemical chapter है भाई
Homework question, if you want to try, you may try.
क्या कितना चलेगा
5 minutes. Hey, you should start talking once and then I better do my chapter. Hello, I give you time. 5 minutes. I'm going to say. Start with you, so you want to solve.
Have you guys completed chapter 10?
I want to.
I'm starting.
just first
Explain what you are saying.
I'm still Tropic Movements.
Something important. Nothing. Better if you all have doubts in certain topics that we may take it up in the next lecture. Better we finish this chapter now. Because इसमें वैसे भी तुमको ही पढ़ना है. I cannot explain anything to make things simple. हाँ. Grandmother. What are you saying? What are you saying?
वही है
उसको पता है इसके लिए बोल रहे हैं नाम करते इसका मतलब क्या होता है
वो अमित शाह ने
आई थिंक प्रोग्रामिंग को सीक्वेंस है
No, if you are done, the discussion is so important. If you are done, you tell me I am there. I am there. I should thank you. Why should you thank me?
वेलकम
Now look at this. We are talking about chemical coordination. इसमें क्या पढ़ोगे? Few functions of the hormones. Already you know what are hormones. Hormones are special chemical substances released by the body tissues in animals you have studied. Here you are talking about plants. For plants, only 5 specific hormones you have to study. For animal hormones, there were a whole lot of hormones. We studied their functions, disorders, etc. Here, nothing as such, but only you have to come across that do the plants also undergo the process of much you can talk. So now that we are talking about what happened, I thought Tanmay fell down. Now, when we are talking about the characteristics of chemical coordination in a plant, chemical coordination in a plant is also by the way of hormones released by the plant tissues. Now, which are the plant parts which releases hormones? If you are aware about the word meristematic tissues, when we are talking about meristematic tissues, these are the cells which are majorly involved in releasing the hormones. Okay, majorly the meristematic tissues are involved in releasing the hormones. And what type of functions does the hormone in a plant majorly bring about? Majorly the growth. Majorly growth of the plant parts, process of germination, process of seed formation. So these are some of the common functions that you will always come across. So first of all, which are those hormones that we are talking about? We are talking about 2 categories of hormones. We are talking about 2 categories of hormones. What will you study here? Overall, the 5 hormones that you are going to study will come under major 2 categories. Some hormones are growth regulators. They inhibit, they promote the process of growth. So they are known as regulators or promoters. Another set of hormones are inhibitors. They inhibit, they stop the process of growth once the adequate amount of growth is done. And some hormones are both ways, both promoter as well as inhibitor. Get acquainted with their names. What are those names? The first name that we talk about is oxygen. We are talking about the first hormone, oxygen. Oxygen, gibberellins, cytokinin, abscisic acid, and ethylene. So these are the 5 hormones that you want to study. Oxygen, and cytokinin, oxygen, cytokinin, and oxygen. Oxygen, when we are talking about the oxygen and the cytokinin or the gibberellin, these are basically the promoters. These are basically the promoter. They generally help in the process of growth. When we are talking about abscisic acid, an inhibitor, a major inhibitor in the process of growth in the plant. Ethylene, sometimes acting as a promoter, sometimes as a inhibitor. So that is the first concept to understand. We talk about the oxygen. When we look now, these are the basic, synthetic and the natural. So we are majorly, as per your portion, you are only talking about the natural type of the hormone which is released in the plant tissues. What are some of the functions? Straight away, I move on to the concept of the functions there. What type of functions do they generally undergo? To talk about these hormones, they would majorly show the process of. Let us look into some functions straight away. Here, they're there. How much she can huh? She is highly confused whether to listen to the teacher or listen to my friend. I know. Teacher को सुन के करना क्या है? Friend को तो गलती से मिलना है, personally से मिलना है. Now, what are some of the important functions you may take in your book also? Which are some of the prominent functions? When you read the chapter, you should take a note. First of all, when we are talking about the oxygen, always to remember, they basically help in growth, but by the process of cell elongation. Process of cell elongation. Now I talk about cell elongation and cell division are two different concepts. Cell elongate hoke growth hona and cell divide hoke growth hona are two different things. So cytokinin does cell division and growth. Oxygen does cell elongation and growth. So ये concept थोड़ा याद रखना है. When you talk about this, that is what I said. That's the first point to remember. So that's the no, not necessary. I'm talking about a cell. Every single cell would undergo the process of extensive elongation by the way of their cell member, the cell wall, by the main wall feature. There, not osmosis. This particular hormones are allowing extensive growth of certain proteins, which are allowing the extensive elongation of every particular cell in that tissue. But if I have to talk about cytokinin's function, then I will say that they speed up the process of cell division so much. The rate of cell division is extensively increased. So that is one concept you remember. Next, you talk about apical dominance. What is the meaning of apical dominance? You should remember. What is apical dominance? Apical dominance, vertical growth. Meaning, I talk about a plant. Say, suppose a shrub or a herb. Hindi Divas. Now, when we are talking about this plant is growing. This plant is growing. Apical dominance, matlab the plant will constantly keep on growing. It will not give rise to any side branches. Yes. But if we keep on cutting or removing the apical buds, after some time, lateral growth starts. So it is only because of the distribution of the hormone. जब तक apical part में hormone concentration ज़्यादा रहेगा, apical dominance. So that is the concept you understand. So अगर apical dominance होगा, suppression of growth in the lateral buds. You are asked, what is meant by apical dominance? Which hormone regulates this process? So ऐसे questions आता है, and you are supposed to understand what exactly to write there. So that is about apical dominance. What are some of the other functions? Keep us straight now. What is about the other functions? You are going to understand the other functions. See here, induces parthenocarpy. What is parthenocarpy? Fertilization of fruits without fertilization. Formation of a fruit without fertilization. Prevents premature falling of leaves. This particular hormone, oxygen that we are talking about, does not allow senescence. What is the meaning of senescence? Aging and falling, aging of the plant parts and falling off. So that it may prevent. All these are not very important. And when we are talking about promotes flowering, the sixth point is also very important for you. Promotes flowering. This particular hormone also helps in the process of flowering. It helps in flowering of the plant tissues. Second, we talk about gibberellins. Gibberellins, when we are talking about, it is present in the lower group of plants much more. When we are talking about the lower group of plants, much more. And where is it distributed? Wow, excellent. Hold on, Shreya, hold on. ये क्या है? तन्मय को देना with love. What is it, but? 10th standard. मुझे लगा मैं आई मीन सेकंड स्टैंडर्ड या थर्ड स्टैंडर्ड क्लासरूम में भी बच्चे आजकल ऐसे नहीं करते. कौन से तन्मय को तुम दे रहे थे? He's your best friend. और देख रहा है, सोच रहा है क्या. Now, when we are talking about gibberellins, some functions to take a note. What are some of the important functions you will write? Check the function that is there in your book also. Keep taking some of the most important ones that you should always write. Promotes. Lateral elongation hai. Promotes bolting also when we are talking about. It helps in the elongation of the plant parts sideways. Helps in sideways growth. And delays senescence. This hormone also. Now, this hormone is a promoter or an inhibitor promoter is there. And it also helps in delaying the process of senescence. Then when we are talking about induces parthenocarpy, inserting different type of plants, it also induces the seed without fertilization. So this is about the gibberellins.
Gibberellins, the delay of senescence is in the leaves of plants.
In the leaves. Senescence delay in the leaves, senescence delay in the, when we are talking about senescence, majorly would occur in the leaves and the flower. So that it delays. Then what else? It can break seed dormancy. That also you have to remember as a point. Prevent seed dormancy. When we are talking about break seed dormancy, what do you understand? What?
Resting period, yeah.
So it helps in utilizing nutrient from the surrounding. This hormone, jab adequate amount of synthesis ho jayega, it will be able to absorb nutrients from the surrounding and start the process of germination immediately, because quite a number of seeds may remain dormant for years also. So that's a loss for the plant. So that is it. A cytokinin. When we talk about cytokinin again I bring into your notice the process of growth which has been brought about by cell division, always to understand. Promote cell division of which different type of tissues, majorly non-meristematic. When I talk about non-meristematic tissue, can you give me an example of non-meristematic tissue? The stem. When I talk about the tip of the roots, tip of the stem, these are meristematic, and the bulk of the stem, these are generally non-meristematic. No, so there also they may bring about little bit of a growth. Then next is we are talking about it helps in rapid cell division even in the root and the stem. What else? When you talk about cytokinin, cytokinin can also induce the production of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll production also it may induce in. It may also bring about the formation of chlorophyll, formation of cotyledons, inhibit apical dominance. That's a major function. Suppress apical dominance and bring about sideways growth. Next is we talk about abscisic acid as stress hormone, always to be remembered as just quite similar like those adrenaline that we talk about. No, but in case of a plant, how stress? No, not at all. Not at all. Growth retarding meaning. Growth retarding meaning it will not allow the process of growth happen if it is in too much, if it is in excess quantity. Abscisic acid, what are you supposed to write down? When certain times when a plant is in the process of growth, but some of the other condition is not suitable for the process of growth, then such type of hormone, if there in adequate amount, may help the plant to still grow. No? So that's a concept of a stress hormone. What are some important functions? Inhibits seed germination. So that's an important point that you should remember. Induces senescence. Senescence, you know, aging of the plant parts, falling of the plant parts, like leaves, the yellowing and falling off. That is called senescence. Stimulates the closure of the stomata. These are some points to remember. Stimulates closure of the stomata, and it may also accelerate the falling of the leaves, buds, flowers. Ethylene, when we are talking about ethylene, what is the major function of ethylene? Maturation of the seed, ripening of the fruit. These are some important functions. And it is only one particular hormone that the plant produces, which is released or which is there in the gaseous form. So this is one concept to remember. Break seed dormancy, this particular hormone also. Now, say suppose today that the different type of fruits and the crops that we get to see, most of them are being plucked or harvested in the premature form, and then they have been injected with these type of gaseous hormones, and then they have been made much larger in size, or they look ripe but internally they don't get ripe. So that's the reason the fruit or a mango which looks yellow, the taste may not be that sweet. So that is what we come across also nowadays. So this can be done. So inducing growth in many different cases, rapid elongation, sprouting of the potato. So these are all artificial conditions which are done. Now we talk about, I think you can hold on for 5 minutes. Sit down. Now, when we are talking about plant responses, so what are we talking about? Plant responses. Plants can respond to variety of different type of factors such as water, temperature, sunlight, touch. So now that we are talking about any different type of stimulus that the plant can respond to, such type of movements are called tropic movements. Such type of movements are called tropic movements. So what are the different type of tropic movements you have in your syllabus to study? Phototropism, response of the plant parts to light. I talk about hydrotropism, response of the plant parts to water. I talk about geotropism, gravity. Talk about thigmotropism, touch, and chemotropism to chemical, and heliotropism to duration of sunlight. What is the duration of sunlight? So now intensity and direction. Intensity and direction both. So when we are talking about the tropism, when we are talking about the tropic movement, the first is certain concepts of phototropism. Very simple. What are some examples you will always cite? Phototropism. What are some of the common examples of phototropism? The growth of the shoot towards sunlight. Phototropism. The growth of the shoot towards sunlight. So that's a common concept to always understand. So if I look into this, the growth of the shoot, why does the shoot always grow towards the sunlight? I talk about the flowering plant that I have in the window sill. I put it again across and allow the plant parts to enter my room. Does it remain like that for another few weeks? Just in 3 days, it will again turn the other side. Why? Because the concentration of oxygen and the accumulation of oxygen in the shoot part will always help in the bending and the growth towards sensitivity. That is the sensitivity towards the light that we are talking about. So this is what we are understanding, how exactly the process of cell elongation has been brought about by oxygen here. Next is, what is the concept of negative and positive tropic movement? Say suppose I talk about positive hydrotropism. Which part of the plant positive hydrotropism? Root. Then what do you understand positive hydrotropism? Moving towards water. Negative hydrotropism away from water. No, same like that. So negative geotropism, positive geotropism like this. When I'm talking about germination of seed, this is an example of germination of seed is an example of, can I say germination of seed is an example of geotropism? Roots show the process of positive geotropism. Roots again show positive hydrotropism. Shoots would show negative geotropism. That way, so this is what you have to understand. Chemotropism, when we are talking about, what is the meaning of chemotropism? Response. Now, one of the best examples that you understand here is growth of the pollen tube in response to the nutrient that is there in the style. In the style, there are so many different types of sugar, right? You have different type of simpler proteins are there, different type of peptides are there. So when we are talking about these different type of sugar, which are packed up in the entire style region of the flower, the pollen tube keeps on absorbing them, undergoes the process of cell elongation, cell division, and reach till the ovule. So that's the concept. If there are no nutrients, now in certain type of experiments, these nutrients are removed out. And if the process of germination is, if the process of pollination is allowed, it is found that the pollen tube or the pollen does not undergo the process of germination at all. So that is a concept of chemotropism when we understand. Thigmotropism, we have always come across the climbers and the creepers always need a support and then they grow. So now that they have touched any part of the other stem or a grill or a bamboo or a stick, what happens? They keep on twining or spiraling around. So what is happening there? Response to touch. The stimulus is touch there at that time. Examples are these that you'll have to write down. It is applicable to creepers and climbers. Creepers mostly on the ground, but they may also keep on spiraling around certain other stem. They do. Mostly the climbers. Most of the climbers, when we are talking about the fine different type of stem which are weaker. Then now we are talking about this, the last concept where we understand the direction of the sunlight, the intensity of the sunlight. That may also bring about the growth of the plant, not the shoot part majorly. The sunflower, for an example, to talk about. So that is about heliotropism. What factor and example? Only that much you're supposed to understand. And the 5 hormones that we had studied, at least 2 to 3 examples that you are supposed to understand there. So that is all. In this chapter, nothing much to discuss in this chapter. Read those functions. वो function तुमको ही पढ़ना है. There is nothing to, apart from this, there is nothing to explain as such. Sure. You may call for questions there and find out if there is anything else for which you can Thank you. School, let's see what it means to go. School, some of these. Then